10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Liftoff, and the clock is starting.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And as we fling a bone into the air, we jump cut right into Kerbalcast, episode 29. Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
And just to keep it even, we're going to start with our CMP, that's Command Module Pilot.
Nostromo.
And I am your LMP, Lunar Module Pilot, Biff Aldrin. Coming up in today's program, to lay then back, and
A whirlwind of destruction.
it's our progress in the game.
DK automates Modder's Minute with MechJeb.
And we'll have your letters and tweets in this week's mission briefing.
And after the credits, 2001, A Space Odyssey.
I have been waiting for so long for us to talk about this one.
Yeah.
You and I, it was, what was it? It was the day after we recorded, no, it was the day after, it was the day after we recorded the last episode. You came over, we sat down, and we watched 2001 A Space Odyssey. And I was in geek heaven. So I cannot wait to talk about this. It's been so long since I have been able to watch that movie with someone who was watching it for the first time.
Yeah.
That's an experience. So anyway, after the credits, we're going to have a spoiler-filled discussion about 2001: A Space Odyssey, and there are lots of interpretations. You're going to get our interpretations. We're not necessarily right, but it's going to be ours. How was your Thanksgiving, number one?
I worked it.
You worked it.
Yeah, my job.
How joy.
Holidays, weekends, my own funeral. I'll probably work.
But this is all coming to an end soon, right?
Yeah.
You're
So-
transitioning into a new job.
Yep, I'm on my way out of there.
Yes.
So
Will you be having holidays off?
I hope so, because that means I would have it off in time for Christmas and maybe New Year's. That'd be nice.
Oh, that'd be really good.
Yeah.
That would be very good. Hey, New Year's, you can do some more drunken Kerbaling.
Yeah.
We heard about how well that went last time. Well, you may have noticed a huge jump in our listenership last week.
Oh, yeah?
I am directly responsible for that.
I saw.
Yeah. My girlfriend invited me to her house for Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And her mom, who is a very sweet lady, she is a retired university professor, she wanted to have something to talk about with me. So she watched a documentary on the Rosetta Comet landing, and she asked her daughter, she said, okay, tell me about these podcasts, because I understand he does one of those. And so she went and downloaded an episode and played her the first 10 minutes. And by the way, she was very congratulatory of that nice young man, Nos, and she was glad that he finally got his first rendezvous. She was very, very pleased about that. But anyway, that huge jump in listenership, that extra listener we got last week, which almost doubled the size of our audience.
Yeah.
We got a 1 week jump.
Ooh.
So anyway, and I am responsible.
I'm surprised that you didn't send her to episode 6.
Well, she's not from Canada.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
For some reason, Canada loves episode 6.
Yeah.
So, well, since you had to work over the holidays, how much Kerbal time did you have?
Not a whole lot. I had a little bit. So when we last left...
Oh, do tell.
Yeah, when we last left, what I was supposed to be doing.
That's right. You had some challenges.
I did have a challenge. Okay. I was supposed to put a rolly...
Challenge or challenges?
Well, a challenge.
Okay.
I was supposed to put a rolly and a spinny on the mun within 4K of each other. Mm-hmm. And the rolly was already there as of the last episode. And shortly after, I didn't tweet it out, but I got a spinny there too. And I set the other one as target. I'm not exactly sure how to see the distance between two objects, because I set it as target, but it didn't really tell me. So I don't know. I mean, I could see velocity of the target, but that's not the same thing.
Right.
So I was like, okay. And I'm pretty sure they were close, but just to make sure, I switched over control, because the spinny just spins, but a rolly can roll. So I went over to the rolly, and I started traveling. Noticed I was going a little slow, turned off my brakes, and then really got moving. You know,
if you really want to mess with people's heads, make it to where your rollies spin and your spinnies roll.
I got off. I did a good ramp. I took it off some sweet jumps.
You took it on some sweet jumps, dude.
And then I managed to get a good spin going in the air. You know? And you do it on like 4 times speed, and it goes nuts. It's crazy.
Tony Hawk on the moon.
Yeah. But that was a lot of fun, and so I'm pretty sure the challenge got met.
Okay.
Yeah, and the next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to build a space station, and I noticed.
And this wasn't a challenge.
This is not a challenge.
Okay.
I wanted to build a place where I could refuel, whenever I was in orbit. So I could, since I had done one rendezvous. So
Now that you can do sweet rendezvous.
yeah, so now that I'm more familiar with rendezvous, I could try doing rendezvous more, and I have a target object. So I...
That sounds like something Gwyneth Paltrow would say, sweet rendezvous. Unconscious decoupling. And
Sweet rendezvous.
Yeah.
Bum, bum, bum.
see, I was thinking, for some reason I had Aerosmith going, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Wow.
Yeah.
Right off the topic.
So-
and I'm the one that did it, so my apologies. Go.
I started building one, and I was like, yeah, and it's going to have this, and it's going to have, like, all these fuel tanks and tons of docking ports. It's going to be the coolest thing ever.
I just have to get it off the ground.
You can't afford it. Oh. So it's going to have a couple fuel tanks and a few docking ports. And it's going to, you can't afford that. Oh, it's going to have a fuel tank and a docking port and the cheapest probe core I have. And let's get that up there. And then I was like, that's still a lot of money, though.
Why? Honestly, what you're describing is like the most realistic space program ever. Because seriously, that's how every space mission starts.
Yeah.
Is some guy is going, we're going to make like this awesome, incredible. And
we're going to put a city on the moon. We're going to put a family on. We're going to put their cat. We're going to put their cat on the moon.
We're going to put a hamster on the moon.
We're going to put the dead hamster on the moon.
It's like, you end up with like these, they on the drawing board, it's like these gigantic spaceships. And then by the time they get done, you launch a baseball into space.
Yeah, like,
it's all we could afford.
That was neat.
It's all we could afford.
Even building that thing, I was kind of like, that's a good chunk of my money. And I realized I probably should have done these challenges with outside of career. Because I just spent a lot of my money on these silly things and my rendezvous attempt.
So now you have to start doing a bunch of contracts.
I got to do some contracts. I noticed one of them was plant a flag on the mun. Well, a rollie is made with probe cores. You don't have to have command pods for that. But a spinny uses a command pod because it's narrow, and so it's just upside down, and you spin on the command pod like you're doing like a breakdance move. So I'm like, I can just have Jebediah get out, plant a flag, and boom, cash right there.
There you go.
And
sweet cash.
Docking port, or not the docking port, the hatch was obstructed.
Oh, nice.
With the landing gear that I had to put on, because the landing gear has to reach farther than the command pod does. Right. And so I'm like, ugh. So I did what most of us try to avoid. I tipped the thing over, and I started spinning and just like destroying pieces of it.
Oh, so you knocked the landing legs off.
Yeah. So, but
that's perfect.
Of course, the last thing to break off were the landing legs.
Of course.
Like, it's like, there goes another piece. There goes another piece, and all these little explosions are happening as I spin faster and faster, rolling on the ground. I eventually destroy all the landing legs that are on there and have them get out, plant the flag, and say goodbye to ever going home. And I got a little money off that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I kind of want to build a good little nest egg. So I actually finished my campaign of science.
Okay.
I didn't finish all the build trees, but I said science is kind of secondary to me right now. Right. Once I get to where I'm doing something cool, I'll head back to it. But just doing all these other contracts, I moved over to to monetizing everything. Okay. So now any reputation I get will convert to money, so I have to do less contracts in order to get back to the things I'm working on.
Okay.
So I'm going to be doing contracts probably most of this week.
See, this goes back to what we were talking about when the last update to the game came out. What you're describing right there is what makes 0.25 work.
Yeah.
Is everything you're doing, all of the pieces now mean something.
Yeah.
They all fit together and they all have a meaning.
And now, like, I'm having to make decisions based on what my what's currently going on. Because before, I'm like, well, I got to do more contracts. I was like, well, I got to do more contracts, but I don't really want to do them. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to just make them worth more money at the cost of other things.
Right.
If I liked doing contracts, I could make it convert to science, and then I could get science without having to go and do big exploratory stuff. Mm-hmm. So that was really nice. So,
cool.
So I converted that over, and I'm going to start working on that stuff. But yeah,
it sounds like you got a lot done.
It sounds like it. Yeah.
It sounds like it.
I have a
Sorry, you got me off guard with
I
that.
have a space station in orbit at almost the same height as the apoapsis and periapsis.
Okay.
And so it's like almost a complete circle. And then I have a Kerbal not just hanging out on the mun because he destroyed his spinny, so he doesn't even get to do that anymore.
Oh, how nice.
So I think my next thing is I'll try to, I don't know, since I'll have a refueling station, refuel a lander after it gets up there, and then get to the mun, go down and rescue him.
Okay.
And then bring him back up because I have the.
Oh, you're going to have to do another pinpoint landing.
Oh, I will.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't run that fast either.
No. Well, I mean, they do. I mean, technically, he can run whatever distance.
Yeah.
But, whether you want to sit there for 12 hours.
It reminds me of the times whenever, like, there was some item that I had to run into in, like, an RPG on the PlayStation. And so I put a rubber band around the joystick. So he just ran in circles. You want to hear something funny? I have nobody can see this, but I'm showing it to you. I have a little metal flashlight, one of those little pin light flashlights. Yeah. This thing is exactly the right size to fit on one of my keys on my laptop. And there are times when I need to, like, for example, hold down the RCS key for a long time. Yeah. What I will do is I'll kick it up to like 4x. And I'll put this thing on the key for the RCS and then just leave it standing there and just sit there and just watch. Yeah. That way I don't have to just keep pressing it. You prevent arthritis and you get stuff done. So
that's right. The cure for carpal tunnel.
Yeah.
A little flashlight. Well, yeah, the little tricks you could, but like if you're going to make a guy run for long periods of time and it's in a straight line, this is the thing you would do is you'd get like a little flashlight and just...
I may have to borrow that.
Yeah. No, this is mine, man. This is my little trick.
But yeah, that's pretty much the majority of my progress.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. That sounds like you've done a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Remind me, have you been... you're not getting me with that the second time. Have you been to Minmus yet?
No, that's why I'm building that fueling station. Okay. So whenever I get the thing up in space, I can refuel and then head out to Minmus.
Have you seen Minmus yet in the game?
No.
Okay. Okay. I couldn't remember if you had or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
What had happened before is the things that I had to build were so expensive that I should not have bothered because the amount of money I'd lose just trying to even get there.
Right.
And the amount of reverting I'd have to do, it's like, nah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, Minmus is, because of its slanted orbit, it's not something you just, casually stumble upon. You have to, it's like you have to intentionally go there. Mm-hmm. So anyway, well, cool. Well, is that your progress?
That's my progress.
Okay. At the end of last week or during last week's podcast, I said that I was shooting for lathe. And I very, very quickly, I think it was the very next day, I managed to land on lathe. Very difficult to do.
Yeah.
Lathe has a very thick atmosphere, fairly heavy gravity. I ended up building a heavy-duty lander because everything that I had taken there before was falling apart on landing or falling over. And I was not able to get my speed down enough to where I wasn't, you remember when I mentioned soft landing earlier? Yeah, I wasn't getting my speed down enough to where I could make a soft landing. So I ended up with, are you ready for this? I had a lander with 12 landing legs. I'm not kidding. Yeah, it was 6. I had 6 engines arranged symmetrically around a center tank, and the center tank it had the fuel hoses that were feeding the outer tanks.
Yeah.
So I had 6 engines. At the base of each of those, there was 2 landing legs, so 12 landing legs, and I had on top of each of the 6 fuel tanks, I had, what are you doing?
Nothing. Keep going.
You're messing with your coat.
Yeah,
okay.
I was moving my coat.
Are you cold?
No, I'm good.
Okay, you're good. You're good. On top of each of the fuel tanks, I had a parachute. Okay, so 6 parachutes. I also had, on top of the capsule, I had a parachute. And on the side of the capsule, I had 2 parachutes. So this thing had 9 parachutes, 12 landing legs, okay? Coming down for a landing on lathe, I fire off my parachutes, and I still have to burn my engine just to get a soft landing.
Wow.
I mean, that tells you something right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course I had to be real careful to ride the throttle because I was able to get it down. I was able to get my speed down to where I could literally zero it out. And the problem there was a couple of times I got just within a hair of the surface, and all of a sudden my speed, which had been inching down to 0, would suddenly start to climb.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of times where I was coming in for a perfect landing, and all of a sudden it would start back up. And I would, overreact, and I'd hit the X key to kill the engines or something. And of course, then it would just go.
Yeah, pick up speed so fast.
Yeah, it would just come right back down again, and I couldn't, throttle up fast enough to catch it. But the biggest problem I had, Lathe is primarily a water planet. It has, you know what? I just did it again. I keep saying, we had a listener point out to me, and we'll get to this when we hit the tweets.
Uh-huh.
Those things orbiting around Jewel are moons.
Not planets.
They're not planets. But I keep, especially like with Lathe, because it looks so much like a planet.
Yeah.
I keep calling them planets. They're moons. Okay, so anyway, Lathe is a water moon. It is largely water. There are some very small islands scattered around. But unlike Kerbal, for example, which has very large land masses, and unlike the majority of the other celestial bodies, I'll say that to keep myself out of the planet-moon trap.
Say satellites.
Yeah, that's true, satellites. But unlike most of them, which don't have any kind of an ocean at all, any kind of water, and there obviously you can land anywhere. With Lathe, you have to hit these very tiny little targets. And because the atmosphere is so thick that you can create a D-orbit that is perfect, that'll bring you right into a landmass. But as soon as you hit the atmosphere, it decelerates you so fast that you either overshoot or undershoot. And these are very, very, we're talking when you're trying to hit these things from orbit, they are very small targets.
It's like one of those times a space plane is really what you want.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what I find hilarious though was because I kept either overshooting or undershooting, or if I did actually come down on an island, chances are I was coming down too fast, or I would bounce, or basically the F9 key got its workout. Okay, let's put it to you that way. I finally land on Lathe. I overshoot the biggest landmass that I could find, and I end up landing on this little sliver of land that is just off the coast of the big landmass. So I managed to land on like the smallest target on Lathe by accident. And honestly, it was me. It was the last second. I was covering my butt because I had overshot. the landmass that I was shooting for, but I saw that this little sliver was coming up. And so I tilted my lander, and I was good on fuel. I had not, at that point, I hadn't burned hardly anything. Mm-hmm. So I leaned into the direction of my motion, and I fired my thrusters, and I managed to extend my arc just far enough to where I touched down almost right on the shoreline.
Wow.
I got Jeb out. The lander that I built, it has a storage compartment on the bottom side of it, and it's got a ladder on it. Yeah. So the whole issue of not being able to get back in, I have solved that. That's why, in case anyone was wondering why I built a lander that had 6 engines symmetrically around a center tank but no center engine, it's because that's where the landing hitchhiker's container was.
Got it.
That's why that was. And it's just slightly off the ground. But I put a ladder in there because I thought, sure enough, Jeb's not going to be able to jump that high, and then I'm going to be stuck on lathe again. But I landed very, very close to the shoreline, and I got Jeb out, and I used my little handy flashlight, and I 4X and ran him to the shore. And I took a picture and I tweeted it out, and it's Jeb standing right on the edge of the water.
Yeah.
You've got on the left side of the picture, you've got the water, and on the right side of the picture, you've got the land, and then centered just perfectly right over Jeb is Jewel in the sky. Beautiful picture.
Yeah.
But anyway, I tweeted it out like it was a vacation shot. I said, come visit our lovely beaches.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, so that's what I did. I got Jeb to lathe, ran all my science and everything. What I did, I decided to do something different, though. In the past, the way I would do missions was I would build a ship, I would send it to wherever I needed to go, land, return to the ship, and then the ship itself would come back to Kerbal. Okay, what I decided to do this time, since I've been playing around with modular building, you remember what I've talked about, where I've got senior docking ports on both sides of each section of the ship. What I did this time, I spent a lot of the week redesigning and rebuilding a large ship in orbit. The last time I did this, you recall, the propulsion section was in the back, and when I ignited it, it immediately compressed everything in front of it and exploded. Well, what I did was I redesigned one to where the propulsion was in the back, and it did not compress everything in front of it. So I managed to work it out to where it functioned properly, like it was supposed to. And I was able to leave Kerbal at full throttle with a lander on the front of it. And I had a fuel tank, and then I had the thrusters in the very back. What I did was I sent this to the Joule system. When I got there, I matched up with the other ship that was in orbit, and that's when I started doing my modular building in Joule orbit. Because basically what I did was I said, okay, I've got my lab module, I've got my habitat module, I've got all these various things that are already here. So there was no point in bringing them.
Yeah.
And so I took apart my new ship, took apart the old ship, and built essentially two different ships out of what was left. The new lander with the new crew is now going to go. I've decided, since I landed on Lathe, which is the innermost moon, I'm going to now shoot for Val, which is the second one out. And I'm gonna try and hit them one right after the other.
From the inside out.
Yeah, just kind of work because I landed on, strangely enough, I landed on the one that was furthest out, hull, and then I landed on the one that was closest in. So now I'm going to work my way back out. And again, Val is the one that is, it is very similar to Europa.
Yeah.
It's an ice planet. Ice moon. I did it again.
Yeah.
But anyway, my new target is Val. I have a new crew and a new lander in orbit. The old crew and the old lander are now going to use the rebuilt ship that I sent to Joule, and I'm going to use that to return back to Kerbal. They're going to take all their science with them, and they're going to jettison whatever parts they no longer need of this ship as they go.
Oh, okay.
And they will return to Kerbal, and they'll land, and they'll get their full science.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I already have another mission in Joule orbit with a fresh crew and a fresh lander, so I can go to another moon and get all the science. And I'll do the same thing again. I'll send another ship with another crew and another lander, and then start switching out parts again. But this way, instead of sending one ship there and back, I'm actually sending multiple ships and multiple crews, but they're using bits and pieces. Instead of taking every time the science lab, I just keep changing it. I just keep adding it to another ship when it gets there.
Yeah.
And of course, the new ship always brings more fuel with it. So I'm able to keep refueling and resupplying.
Yeah, you don't have to build the same part and reuse it in the next thing.
Yeah, you can send smaller ships that way. And then, of course, you just basically build what you need and then come back with it.
Yeah. That's a great idea.
And what you need for your exploration in the Joule system, you leave there, obviously. So that's what I'm doing. So that's been my big progress of the week. I continue to play orbital Legos, and I did manage to get on and off lathe, which was something I have never done that, because prior to Pole, I had never landed on anything in the Joule system.
Yeah.
So that was my first time to land on lathe. Lots of F9ing. But I managed to do that. So anyway, next target is Val. So we'll be able to talk about that when that comes.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my progress for the week. So do you want to move on and talk about Modder's Minute with DK?
Yeah.
Okay. DK is actually talking about I put MechJeb on my ships, and I don't do it for the automation.
I think it's something that, like, if you don't want to deal with a lot of things, you can do that. Or if you want to see how something does it and learn from it.
Right.
So
it's MechJeb takes too long for me a lot of times. Like if I want to do a rendezvous.
Coming from the guy who puts a flashlight on his laptop.
A flashlight on my laptop. Yeah, exactly. The Rube Goldberg over here. But the reason I like MechJeb is it has a lot of data screens that you can pull up. It gives you a lot of information. And DK is going to talk about some of that in this week's Modder's Minute.
This segment has been on the show for a while now, and I haven't yet talked about what is probably the most powerful and most polarizing of mods that Kerbal Space Program has to offer. MechJeb does so much that I simply won't be able to cover it all in depth. Everything that the mod does falls under two categories: information and automation. A lot of people use MechJeb for its informational content, which is very similar to another mod we've covered, Kerbal Engineer Redux. The other half of what MechJeb does is what polarizes people on the mod, the automation. If you want it to, MechJeb will pretty much play the game for you. Everything from getting into orbit to point-and-click precision landing. Now, this can certainly be used to teach people how to play the game, and this is how some do learn. But there's a certain section of the KSP community who feels that the mod is just a little too much on the cheaty side. One of the great things MechJeb does is in Science or Career mode, you actually slowly unlock different modules along with the regular parts. So you might start with just some informational displays and then end with full-on autopilot. Regardless of what your stance is on MechJeb, it is the most downloaded mod the game has, and certainly worth taking a look at.
Okay, that was DK with Modder's Minute on MechJeb, and we want to let you know that DK does do a Twitch stream. You can find him on twitchtv.com on Declarations, DK-larations.
Yeah, DK-larations.
And he also does some spots on KSP TV. And he also has a YouTube channel with a lot of awesome stuff on it.
Yes, and also he's currently working on the world's energy crisis.
And he is actually coming up with a new way to slice bread.
That's right.
That was previous better than the old way.
Yeah.
It'll be
It'll be the best thing since the old sliced bread.
Yeah. So whenever somebody says, like, hey, that's the best thing since the new sliced bread that replaced the old sliced bread.
That's exactly right.
And it's going to be longer to say, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, that's right. Our point is DK is very busy.
So,
but we appreciate him.
And he gives us some awesome stuff.
Yeah, and we appreciate him taking time to do the Modder's Minute.
So we are now on to the mission briefing.
Mission briefing. That's your letters, Kerbal news, and tweets. And Nos has our first letter.
Okay, our first one comes from Merlintho, and this one was posted on Video Game Geek. Which actually, there's a bunch of different ones. There's like RPG Geek for like Dungeons and Dragons kind of stuff. And there's Board Game Geek. This is Video Game Geek. And the post says, I was determined to develop a more successful space plane.
This is his blog, is that correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this is the update, his latest blog.
Yeah. My wife suggested I should make it a triangle shape, or like a UFO. This could be an interesting challenge. So I did an internet search to see if anyone had been successful in creating one like that, and found some YouTube videos. I found one by Helmet K, and he flew it to Duna and back. It doesn't show the constructing of the space plane, so I just copied the design the best I could from watching it. It took a large number of tweaks to get to the point to where I could leave the atmosphere. There's a definite balancing act with space planes, because as you use up fuel, it can make a huge difference to the stability of your plane. Eventually I left the atmosphere and obtained an orbit around Kerbal. Then, after reaching orbit and rendezvousing with my space station, I decided that docking without RCS wasn't going to happen at my space station, and it isn't very maneuverable. So another refit this time with RCS. I used radial tanks as close to the center of gravity that that I could to help minimize stability problems. This time I managed a very easy dock with the space station, although I still believe my takeoff could have been more efficient. Now, this isn't all of it. This is a little over a third. If you want to read the rest of Merlintho's post, go to Video Game Geek and search for that user.
Very good. Okay, what else do we have?
Our next letter comes from Whisker Fox. I had a similar problem with my landers being top-heavy and tipping over after landing. This became especially problematic while attempting to land in the canyon on Mun, where my first attempt tipped over, and my first rescue ship also tipped over. So I suggest designing a lander when you design a lander, to put as much of the mass as possible toward the bottom to lower its center of mass with respect to the landing legs, and then put those thrusters at the very top to help you stay upright after landing.
See, that keeps me upright. Most of my mass is in the bottom.
That said, I also found Amy's story very entertaining. My sign-off should be, "Who will rescue the rescuers?" from Whisker Fox. Yeah, and whenever you're building something, you can hit center of mass to see the current center of mass. You can build your lander with respect to how you're going to put the center of mass, and then you can tack on the rest of the ship.
Yeah, the last thing you want is a top-heavy lander, because, oh, man.
Yeah.
Unless you come down, unless you execute an absolutely perfect landing, you're going to be on your side.
Yeah, or you are now executing a spinning maneuver.
That's true.
Yeah, to try to walk the thing back up.
And that's Nos's field.
Yeah.
That's what he does. You know, I love that sign-off, "Who will rescue the rescuers?" Because what does it make me think of?
Who
watches the
Yep.
watchers? Yeah, exactly. Watchmen.
Yeah.
Rorschach's Journal. Okay. Let's see. Next letter. This comes from MK3424, and it says, "Hey, guys, it's been a while since I last sent a message to you. I've been busy the last couple of weeks by being a vice president of a KSP company called KMC, which is Kerbal Mines Corporations, which, by the way, they're hiring and they're taking requests. I'm going to read. This is from their website. It says, quote, "Welcome to Kerbal Mines Corporation. Here we make anything and everything you need. We have people who build space planes, shuttlecrafts, and replica spacecraft. We here have the skills." You know what? That should read, "We have the mad skills, yo."
Oh, okay.
"Knowledge, and have fun making anything and everything you ask. We enjoy KSP and enjoy making crafts enough to make them for you. So browse our list of craft or join our local KMP server. Or join up. Why can I not say join? I'm having trouble with the word join. Or join up. We could always use new hands. And their web address is kmchanger.com. You can basically, if you can do a request, you contact them and say, "Hey, this is what I want."
Yeah, I want a flying donut.
Yeah. It's funny. Our minds both went to food, because I was immediately going to say, I want a spaceship in the shape of a banana.
Oh.
But you said donut, and technically that would work better.
Yeah.
So okay, fine. Anyway, back to the letter from MK3424. He says, "I give advice to others and regularly fix some crafts for them, while at the same time keeping a KSP multiplayer server online for the guys of the company to play on it. Lately, I've also been interested in designing replicas of real-life launchers. I've already made the Saturn 1, the Saturn 1B, and of course the Saturn 5, and made something for myself and others, a working space shuttle using only stock parts. Props goes to Cosmos, not for the inspiration." I sense there's a story there.
Yeah.
"I keep most of my new designs on the great website from," oh, good Lord, I'm going to destroy this. Katatiochi? Close enough.
I was thinking that same thing.
Yeah.
Even though
You
I
were
can't-
thinking that?
no,
You were thinking I was going to destroy it? Yeah. Yeah, we were both thinking that. He says the great website, it's called Kerbalx.com, which we've talked about before. I should have just jumped to that and not worried about destroying that poor guy's name. And he says, "Much greetings from your fellow Kerbonaut, MK3424. And are you ready for the sign out? The sign off is space out, yo." Well, he doesn't say yo. He just says space out.
Oh, okay. Space out.
But see, I heard, you know what? To me, it needed a yo.
Yeah.
Space out, yo.
All right. You only get so many of those.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
There's-
So what do you have?
I probably have a good 40 yos left before I die. But
You know what I have? I have yo ho ho and a bottle of.
yeah, see, I voiced a documentary on yo-yos, and that took up a lot of them. Anyway, next letter.
Okay.
Dear,
What?
that's Biff and Nos interleaved since I know you don't like one of you being before the other. Even though B was still the first one.
Oh, come on.
I thought I would respond to Amy K's question about building landers. From the lander design perspective, Deadly Reentry adds the necessity to bring a heat shield for the pod. There is no need to bring back science equipment unless you are going for funds recovery. FAR adds more constraints on aerodynamics. You want to make sure your rocket is streamlined and using fairings if possible. The main conflict with this is that the wider landers are easier to keep upright, but harder to make aerodynamic. As with any craft, the payload weight makes a huge difference in the amount of delta V you have. Plan your flight in reverse and drop any unnecessary weight as you go. Remember that science can be collected and stored in the command pod while you're out on EVA. This includes not bothering to drag the landing gear back with you. As you're aware, landers falling over is a big concern. Yeah, as Whisker Fox is saying. The usual beginner lander designs involve a wide design with the landing legs on the edges. The shorter and wider the lander, the easier it is to keep upright. FAR favors more streamlined rockets, however, thus you have to decide how your landing skill balances with aerodynamics. For taller landers, torque makes your life much easier, and ASAS module helps you keep a lander upright if you land on a slope. It adds weight, so don't plan on bringing it home unless staging is more convenient. Your flight path can have a huge effect on fuel efficiency as well. An easier approach is to drop your periapsis to just above the terrain height. Then near your periapsis, burn retrograde until horizontal velocity is 0. Make sure you're in surface mode. This way will be falling straight down from a low altitude. You only need to make sure that your sink rate is acceptable and make minor corrections for horizontal velocity. Any horizontal velocity upon touchdown is a recipe for a flipped lander. This letter turned out longer than I expected. It might be best to paraphrase it or just... That was from Jim 3535.
In the year 3535. The only caveat I would toss in, he says, don't worry about bringing back your science equipment.
Yeah.
Make sure you get your science.
Yeah, make sure you grab your science first.
Yeah, grab your
apparently,
science.
you have to be outside the ship to go up to the thing to get the science.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that.
You have to get close to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. No, I was going to say, I could see, because I have done that so many times. I'll be burning through the atmosphere thinking, man, perfect mission, and I left all my science up there. So anyway, okay. Next letter, and this is from our friend North Star. He says, "Hi, Nos and Biff." I think he meant to say Biff and Nos.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, he was wrong if he meant to do that.
And you know what? I think he meant to say yo. I'm sensing it. I'm sensing a yo.
You only have so many of those left.
That's true.
Don't waste them.
And a bottle of rum. First off, congratulations to Nos on his first successful rendezvous docking.
Thank you.
You demand.
Hey.
You demand. You also got a tweet, Mitten Poe.
Yeah.
Congratulated you on your successful rendezvous.
Thanks, Mitten Poe, North Star.
So
thank you.
They're all they're praising you. He says there's an old saying in medical teaching: see one, do one, teach one. And so far, having Biff demonstrate how to rendezvous and dock, and then changing seats and having Nos repeat it, you guys have been following it exactly. Can I suggest Nos follow on with the teach one part as well, and try teaching one of his friends who is struggling to learn docking? Nos doesn't have any friends.
What are friends?
No, that's me. That's me. I'm sorry, I got that confused. Surely some of them must play KSP. Teach them how to do so if they're struggling in the near future as well. Anyway, Biff, congratulations on your high-speed refueling. That's a very difficult accomplishment, and as probably one of your few listeners who's actually carried it out before, it's an uncommon feat. I have to congratulate you on having the guts to attempt that and carrying it out successfully. It wasn't guts, honestly. It was lack of common sense. It was just one of those, I don't know if I could do this.
Yeah.
Honestly, if I'd have known how difficult and uncommon, I probably would have never tried it. So
yeah.
Stupidity carries the day. Maybe that's why Kerbal knots have the stupidity.
There you go.
Yeah, maybe that's why they have courage and stupidity.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to justify yours being that high by saying that, that's fine.
That's true. That's true. See, Mom, I have an excuse. Let's see. You asked if anyone else had ever carried out a similar high-speed refueling before, and I am one of your listeners who has. In the particular instance where I was carrying it out, I was sending off a small space plane I designed for use on Duna, by way of what I like to call an O-berth maneuver from orbit around minmus. Basically, I had the spaceplane in orbit around minmus and ejected it so that it dove back towards Kerbal before performing a burn near periapsis to eject from the Kerbal system towards Duna. However, I discovered that the spaceplane would not have enough fuel to capture into orbit around Duna when it arrived, and since it had a lot of wing area, as it was designed to fly on Duna, I doubted it would be stable in the atmosphere in an interplanetary speed aero capture maneuver, after sending it on its dive back towards Kerbal. So, I sent another fuel tanker right behind the spaceplane from orbit around minmus. I had a permanent fuel depot station there, where I had originally refueled the spaceplane, and had it follow its trajectory towards Kerbal by burning against the spaceplane's relative velocity from an orbit phased just behind the spaceplane at the same altitude. After the spaceplane performed its ejection burn at periapsis, the tanker burned against the spaceplane's relative velocity again, and after a few tiny adjustment burns, therefore, I was able to get a close approach to the spaceplane as it was nearing the edge of Kerbal's sphere of influence, and by matching velocities there, able to then dock with the spaceplane and refuel it. So, largely the same type of refueling has been performed, only combined with an O-berth maneuver in which I dived back towards Kerbal from orbit around minmus. That's something, honestly, I would have never thought to do that, but that sounds good. His sign-off. Fly bravely, and may you always have a star to guide you. North Star. Very good letter. Thank you, sir. What do you have next?
I have a PSA.
A public service announcement?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
This one comes from Dark Mushroom. He wants to notify us that he is not dead and would be happy to accept new questions on things to cover in Dark Matters.
Right.
He is still sick, and he wants to thank us for caring, and he says, keep up the great work.
I miss him.
Yeah.
I miss Dark Matters. That is such a cool segment.
Get well, Dark Matters.
Yes, get well. Come back to us. Yeah, if you have, he will answer, obviously he takes on different topics in Dark Matters. And if you have any questions, he will answer those as well. Just send an email to us or send an email to him. Our email address, obviously, kerbalpodcast@gmail.com. We got some tweets this week. Nas, what did we get?
All right, first one is we want to give a congratulations to Calaster. Yeah, you gave me
now
that name.
You're having pronunciation problems.
Calaster891. First time landing on another planet because of you guys. And there's a screenshot showing 3 Kerbals, a lander, and a flag on the surface of Duna.
You know what? Honestly, that tweet, that made my week.
Yeah.
I mean, because he wrote in and he said, first landing because of you guys.
Yeah.
And I was like, that right there, it was like all worth
We're
it.
so proud.
So proud.
Really cool looking lander, too.
Yeah, it really was. It was a great, it was a great screen. I mean, that would be like a good desktop for your computer or whatever.
I'm going to print it out, put it in my wallet, and show it to people.
Yeah.
Like they're going to show me their kids. I'm like, oh, your kids suck.
Yeah.
Hey, look at this.
I love it. What else do we have?
At Mr. Lucende tweets that he has finished building a space station in Kerbal orbit. And he says, sending my first expedition crew up to my KSS for the first time during its unmanned construction.
Our next tweet, this is the one I referenced earlier. This comes from is it at or the hashtag?
It's at.
Okay,
it's
at.
At symbol.
We've had this discussion before.
Yeah, the pound sign is a hashtag.
That's right. Okay. Yes.
We need to make up another name for it. The at symbol is the Bimbley Do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's Bimbley Do. This is Alex Boyd, and he says, quote, "Hey, Biff, those things orbiting around Jewel, moons, not planets."
Ah.
Yeah, he tweeted this out last week right after we released the podcast. And what I do is whenever we put out the podcast, I always listen to it, to kind of get to make sure that it, there isn't some horrible error in there somewhere. And I was listening to it, and I got this tweet, and right about then, I was listening to Progress, and I kept going, yeah, and then this planet, and then this planet, and this planet, and the whole time I'm going, moons, they're moons. Okay, what was our last tweet?
Bimbley Do Matthew Perry tweets, Kerbalcast, I'm your 500th follower.
Woo!
Congrats on reaching this arbitrarily round figure.
And then we promptly lost 2.
I think 2 people dropped so they could rejoin and be the 500 followers.
Yeah.
But they can't. Matthew
They
Perry,
can't.
you'll always be our 500th follower.
Yes, he's our first 500th follower.
Yeah.
So isn't that cool? 500 followers on.
So
Twitter.
as we continue to decline in the number of followers, we want you to know that you were the peak.
That's right. Okay. Anyway, let's go on. We have one last letter, and this is going to take us a little off topic, but it's from Run Phil Run, and I do want to say that from this point on, if you're not interested in anything non-Kerbal, you can basically stop listening at this point because we're going to go off topic on this letter. We're going to have the end credits, and then we're going to have after the credits where we talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey. But essentially, in terms of talking about Kerbal news and whatever, we're pretty much done with that. So if you want to bail out at this point, please feel free to do so. And this was a letter. We actually got this letter last week. And you remember I'd mentioned some stuff got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
This got lost in the shuffle.
We're like, hey, good letter, and we kept going.
Yeah. So this letter's actually, this was supposed to be in the last episode. But anyway, and it was in response to the last after the credits we did. We did a fairly lengthy discussion. We had both just seen Interstellar, and we talked about it. Run Phil Run says, although I have not yet seen Interstellar, I thoroughly enjoyed your discussion of the film. Call me a nerd, but critical analysis of films and literature is awesome, and you guys do it very well. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Last week, my astronomy professor posed a question that led to some great discussion, and I thought you guys might have some interesting points and opinions. The black hole visualized in Interstellar is in fact based on an accurate simulation of what researchers believe a black hole would actually look like. And let me very quickly say, in case someone's getting nervous, we're not going to do any spoilers. So you're safe. If you haven't seen Interstellar, we're not doing any spoilers. Back to the letter from Run Phil Run. Is this the start of a new type of Hollywood science? One we can actually trust? You guys discussed this a little bit already, but with Interstellar and sci-fi movies in general, what are your thoughts on Hollywood science? That is, if a film inspires you to be curious and appreciate science like black holes, it is important if it is it important if it's always scientifically accurate? I think it's great that movies, books, and games can take things that really happen in the universe and present them in a way that is approachable to a wider audience. You don't need to understand relativity or astronomy or physics to see that black holes are super weird and super cool. Anyone can appreciate that. I think that classical Hollywood science is acceptable if and only if it is not attempting to portray historical situations or actual objects, locations, etc. People go to a fantasy planet that has some magical reverse gravity, go for it. People go to Venus and don't melt on the surface, go for it. GTFO. No, wait a minute. That is not go for it, is it?
No.
That's the opposite of go for it, isn't it?
That is very much the opposite of go for it.
Okay, well, and I'm not going to say it because I want to keep a clean rating on this podcast. But anyway, okay. So just kind of mentally edit that, folks. Hey, I'm acronym deprived.
This just in. Old guy finds internet acronym. More at 10 o'clock.
Have you seen have you seen those If Google Were a Guy shorts on College Humor does them?
No.
It's how stupid some of our internet queries are if you actually had to say them out loud to a guy sitting behind a desk. And they have this old guy that keeps popping up, and his queries are things like my grandson Nathan. And, Google's going, no. And he's going, Google.com. That's me. Google website. That's me. Anyway, so that's that. I get to be the old guy for a second there. Back to the letter from Run Phil Run. Remember, I was reading a letter from Run Phil Run. The popularity of shows like Cosmos, old and new, prove that people think science is cool, even if they don't completely understand the details. Hollywood doesn't need to break the rules to make things more interesting. The universe is cool as it is. Let's talk about that. Hollywood science. The question is this the start of a new type of Hollywood science, one we can actually trust? My answer, I hope so. I will not hold my breath.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel.
To me, it depends on the movie and what the movie's trying to do.
Right.
There are some kinds of movie science where I'm okay with like it not being exactly a certain way. Like I don't want to watch them try to do Rendezvous. You know, it just doesn't make for good stuff. So if the thing goes just straight up in the air and takes off, and all of a sudden it's in the atmosphere, like upper atmosphere, and then it's in space just like that, boom, and it happens to line up with the the space station, I'm willing to put up with it.
Yeah.
If they're trying to tout themselves as something that is using science, if it uses science to do it, then as a plot point, then I'm against it. Like they had that movie with Scarlett Johansson, Lucy.
Right.
And it was like, we only use 10% of our brains, and if we use the other 90%, we get cool powers.
We can levitate.
Yeah. And
travel
it's
through
like,
time.
Well, no, you're using a scientific myth that's been disproven.
Right.
Tons of times over. You're using that as a plot point for the movie. If the plot point of the movie centers around some sort of science thing, for at least make the science thing true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, whenever they are saying like, "Hey, we found," like I agree with like if they have go to Venus, it doesn't have like wacky gravity or don't do anything that Venus wouldn't do. But if you go to some other planet, if you want to make it weird or do anything like that, you're in sci-fi. There's a fiction part to sci-fi. That's why it's called sci-fi.
GTFO.
Yeah. So, and the other thing is you don't have to, you can put science stuff in there. You don't have to hit all the particulars because you're not watching a documentary. You're not going to an aeronautics course.
Right.
If you look at a children's book that describes how you digest food, you look at it and there's all these pictures and it doesn't show an accurate portrayal of human anatomy.
Yeah, it's usually like a block of cheese with legs and feet. And
and it's like, and
hands.
it's walking through this little stomach and then it goes to this intestine and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, it was,
Hi, Mr. Stomach.
yeah. And that's not how the body works.
Acid.
But it is enough to convey that the body does something like that.
Right.
And if that kid or, weird adult was reading that book and they wanted to look into, I wonder how it really works, they'll look into it more. But anyone who just passes by, they'll see that and they understand it. It's just like if you look at a dinosaur book, most of those dinosaurs didn't exist at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
And then all this...
Well, it's been pointed out, Jurassic Park is actually misnamed given the different species of dinosaur or the different variety of dinosaurs that were there. I think it was more like Triassic Park, or I can't remember but they said it was like the wrong era. But I mean, it was there because Jurassic Park sounded better.
Yeah, and whenever you get into something like that, there's a lot of information in the world, and there's a lot of specializations you can do in that information. And if you're going to tell a story that is good contains a lot of different things, and it's going to disappoint some specialized area of, intelligence.
Well, you can get science wrong and still be okay. The thing that I will give Hollywood a pass on most of the time is there is no sound in space. Okay. Yeah. Sound does not carry in a vacuum. So consequently, when you hear spaceships roaring and zooming and things exploding and all that stuff, you would not be hearing that. But because an audience, a lot of times the impact of what's happening would be lessened if the audience couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
I'll generally give them a pass. Now, when I see something like 2001 or Interstellar, where they don't have sound in space, I appreciate it. But both of those movies were striving for realism. I'll give you two other examples, and these are giant killer comet movies or giant killer asteroid movies. Armageddon and Deep Impact, which both came out roughly at about the same time. Both of them had sound in space, okay? But Deep Impact was pretty close scientifically throughout the movie. It was pretty plausible. And they got a lot right. So, it's like, okay, I'll let them have their sound in space.
Yeah.
Armageddon, on the other hand, I mean, they threw out so much that it was kind of like sound in space was the least of their problems.
Yeah. I mean, it would be like they can play sound in space, like, a ship exploding or something like that. But if they deliberately try to show you that you can listen to something in space, like if they brought a boombox out there and it was not in any sort of spacesuit or anything, and they just hit play and it started playing music. Yeah. Okay. Come on. Yeah. It's whenever you're deliberately breaking or just completely ignoring certain things.
Right.
It can be problematic. And the biggest thing I'll say is, what's the point of the movie?
Right.
If the point is not realism, like if they started doing weird fantasy stuff in, Apollo 13 or
Yeah,
anything,
exactly.
it's going to be like, okay, that's not the purpose of this movie. The purpose is to show what happened.
Yeah.
But in Interstellar, if they do any metaphysical stuff, well, you're in sci-fi,
Yeah.
and it can do that. It's not like, hey, we're trying to do an active documentary on what it'd be like.
You know what I think, though, is there are, like, for example, Star Trek. I don't think anyone would ever say that Star Trek tries to be realistic.
Yeah.
But the fact is that Star Trek, whenever they talk about like warp drive, for example, if you think about it, warp, which is a common plot point in the show, according to the theory of relativity, we cannot exceed the speed of light, which is what, warp speed is faster than light travel, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the fact that they, even back in the 60s, called it warp travel, warp drive, they actually gave themselves some wiggle room, because one of the kind of loopholes in relativity is you cannot exceed the speed of light in regular space. What they're talking about with warp drive isn't that the spaceships, the starships aren't going faster than light. They're warping the space around them. They're creating a warp bubble where they're literally shortening the space around them, and therefore they're not exceeding the speed of light, even though they are traveling distances faster than they should be able to in normal space.
Yeah.
But, the thing is Star Trek how many times did warp become a plot point? Mm-hmm. And that's a perfect example of them going, we got something right and it gave us something for story. So I think it's really cool that even back in the 60s, they came up with something that was plausible.
Yeah.
Which, when you get to like the latest Star Trek movies, now you've got them setting off cold fusion devices to freeze things. And, that's when you start banging your head on the table, which I enjoyed Star Trek Into Darkness. There were so many things from a scientific and from a plot point of view that were wrong with that, but I still enjoyed it. So, I just kind of go, you know what? I didn't see that. I didn't see how they cured death, and I didn't see how they transport all across the galaxy, and I didn't see any of that. Mm-hmm. Have I ever told you my Armageddon story? No. I've no desire to see this movie at all. Okay.
But you've seen it though, right?
I have seen it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason I saw it was we had some guests come to visit, and I knew that one of the guests was a big action fan, loved action movies, and Armageddon had just come out on video, and I knew that would be something he would enjoy. So I went ahead and, I just kind of, I'm going to be a good host and I'm going to rent this movie for him. So I rented the movie, and, and I'll watch it with him. So I popped the movie in. Have you ever seen Armageddon?
Yeah.
You have? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember the film opens, okay, with way back in time, here comes the dinosaur killer asteroid, okay?
Uh-huh.
And this was the first of many mistakes, okay, because the continents on Earth that you can see, it wasn't Pangea, it was the current continent arrangement.
Oh.
Yeah, it was like
it's been a long time, so
yeah, it's like
and I was pretty young whenever it was.
It's like no. But anyway, so here comes this giant asteroid, and Charlton Heston, like the voice of God, is narrating this, and he's talking about how millions of years ago this giant asteroid came in and it hit Earth and it wiped out the dinosaurs. And I will never forget this. The guy that I had rented this movie for, as this is happening on screen, he turns to me and he goes, like that would ever happen. And I was like, but it did. And, that was, to me, that was just like the one thing they got right in the movie. Uh-huh. And he was going, oh, that's so unbelievable.
Yeah.
Speaking of that scene, by the way, there's a website that I absolutely love, and I strongly recommend this to anybody. It's called Bad Science, and it's by a writer by the name of Phil Plait, A-I-T. He's also written some books, which are also very good. But bad science is he goes through and he talks about bad science in movies. And he had a field day with Armageddon.
I bet.
That one scene in particular, while Charlton Heston, the voice of God, was narrating, he said that the dinosaur-killing asteroid exploded with, quote, the force of 10,000 nuclear weapons. Phil Plait on his website says it's amazing how the writers were trying so hard to convey the severity and the size of this explosion, and they underestimated it. He said the truth is that the estimated force, the explosive force of that asteroid was closer to 10,000 times the entire nuclear arsenal on the entire planet. So what they say in the movie versus what was really happening, what they say in the movie is only a fraction
Yeah.
the explosive force. So anyway, I realize we're a little off topic on that one, but that's, that's an example of, poorly thought out science. So much wrong with Armageddon.
Yeah. Well,
but then again, Armageddon wasn't trying to be realistic.
No.
So you kind of have to give it a pass. Another thing, Star Wars. This kind of always bothers me, but because of everything else that's going on and given the environment that the movies create, I kind of give them a pass. Aerodynamic flight. You know how all of the spaceships, they fly aerodynamically.
Yeah.
Well, that's just kind of one of those things that I just kind of have to let go.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, anything else that you wanted to?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Well, Run Phil Run had also asked us in the previous letter. He had said that there is a big difference between future technology that had been posed by older movies and books and that sort of thing versus what actually came true. And I was doing some research on this. In the last episode, I believe it was, I had mentioned that the world of Blade Runner was coming up soon, and I thought it might be 2015. It actually, I double-checked this, it's actually 2019.
Okay, we got some time.
So, in 5 years, Los Angeles, you need to get cracking on that.
On that neon.
Yeah, that constant rain and the flying cars. We were talking about Star Trek, and especially Into Darkness. In the episode Space Seed, which is where Khan comes from, they said that Khan was one of the world leaders during the eugenics wars that took place from 1992 through 1996. At the end of that, he was deposed, and he and his followers escaped Earth in a spaceship in which they cryogenically froze themselves. So apparently by the late 1990s, we had eugenics wars and cryo freezing.
Yeah. I missed that one.
Yeah, but I found on a website, watchmojo.com, and these are top 10 wrong movie predictions about the future. And these are only from movies that gave specific dates. Number 10, Demolition Man. No murders since 2010, and cryo-freezing technology since 1996, which I guess lines up with Star Trek.
In my world, every restaurant is Taco Bell.
Yeah. Okay. Number 9, Escape from New York. Entire city turned into a maximum security prison in 1988. World War III ended in 1997. Number 8, Terminator series.
I'm fine with that.
You're fine with that.
I'm fine with missing World War III.
Yeah. Yeah, we slept through that. According to Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Skynet takes over the world in 1997. Terminator 3 revised the timeline. Skynet took over the world in 2004. So we missed that.
Oh, good. Most of these have not been too bad.
Although maybe Skynet was hiding in the iPhone. I don't know.
Yeah.
2001: A Space Odyssey, number 7, which we'll get to. By the year 2001, we will have commercial space travel, self-aware computers, and Pan Am will still be operating, even though they went bankrupt in 1991.
Yeah.
Death Race 2000. Society collapses in 1979 with a financial crisis and a military takeover. In the year 2000, we will have televised death races, which, given some of the reality programming, maybe. Fahrenheit 451, also a book, by the way. Very good book if you haven't read it. Atomic Wars in 1990. The movie 2012, number 4, End of the World in 2012.
That's a shame.
Yeah. It's a shame that movie even got made. But I will say no more. There was a movie on the list that I'd never heard of, but this came from 1930, and this is number 3 on the list. Just Imagine. By 1980, names replaced with number-letter combinations, and one of the characters is named, I kid you not, MP3.
Oh.
Boy, talk about getting that one on the nose. They also said that by 1980, we would have flying cars, food pills, you take pills instead of eat food, commercial flights to Mars, and there's actually a scene of this. I could not believe this. Babies come from vending machines.
Huh.
Yeah, apparently the stork was too far out.
You know the one that always gets me on sci-fi things?
Flying cars?
No, the food pills.
Oh, yeah.
Like...
Well, they didn't understand bulk at the time.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I don't think like, oh man, I just want to take a pill and not have to, eat for the rest of the day. It's like, I never found eating to be the burden I wanted to remove in the future.
Well, there was a clip from the movie, and somebody, they pop one of these food pills, and then they say, oh, that roast beef was a little tough. It's like, huh?
You didn't chew anything.
Yeah, it's like, what?
Yeah, but flying cars is one of them.
Have you noticed that every time anybody wants to depict the future, what's the first thing they come up with?
Yeah.
Flying cars.
A joke I make constantly is that anyone born in the technology age, or since, technology, everything's connected and all this stuff.
Right.
They all think that in their lifetime that there will be flying cars.
Yeah.
And that the apocalypse will happen.
Yeah.
And yet they never think those two are connected.
Yeah.
Have you seen how some people drive?
Oh, I was going to say,
give them a flying car.
Well, I mean, think about it. Cars can move in a combination of 4 directions.
Yeah.
Forward, backwards, left, and right.
Yeah, X and Y.
Can you imagine adding 2 more directions, up and down?
Yeah.
Given how bad some people drive, I don't want them flying. I mean, you add just 2 more directions. The amount of destruction.
Yeah.
That would, I mean, at the very least, I don't have to worry about some bad driver driving over my house. But yeah, flying cars, it's for some reason, the minute you want to depict the future, boom, you got to have a flying car. Kevin Smith made a short little thing with the 2 lead characters from Clerks, where they're talking about what actually happened to the flying car.
It's times like this it occurs to me we were lied to by the Jetsons. According to that show, we were supposed to be tooling around in flying cars by now. You see any flying cars lately? That's the problem with TV. It always lies to us.
Number 2 on the list, Back to the Future Part 2, took place in 2015. That's what I was thinking when I confused Blade Runner 2019. I was thinking Blade Runner. Yeah, it's Back to the Future Part 2 takes place in 2015. Guess what we are going to have next year? Flying cars, self-tying shoes, hoverboards, and control over the weather.
Oh, that'll be nice.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
And number 1 on the list, 1984, also a book, Big Brother, Perpetual War, Constant Surveillance, which...
Well, I know that one's pretty spot on.
I was going to say, I mean, George Orwell, obviously
we take that back. We are not under constant surveillance.
Yes, stop listening,
docile,
yes.
And we are completely...
We love the government.
Following our great leader.
Our great leader. All hail Big Brother. George Orwell was obviously exaggerating to make a point, but...
Yeah.
I mean, he got pretty dead. Even in 1984... He was pretty close.
I mean, I think we're fine here because, we have all the walls lined with foil. But for anyone listening, you just want to make sure that, you're wearing your foil hat.
Right. Now he got the, I mean, he was the thing that he got real spot on that, as far as I'm concerned, was he talked about how language had kind of evolved.
Yeah.
And if you spend any time watching politics, you will see how language has been subverted in many cases. Mm-hmm. There are lists of words that politicians are encouraged to use when they're describing their opposition or when they're describing themselves. I mean, we literally see bills in Congress, and I'm making one up, but I mean, you literally see bills with titles like "Ending Childhood Hunger," and then you read the bill and it kills all the food assistance programs.
Yeah.
It's like, huh? It's like, how can you? I mean, it's almost like Bizarro World. It's like let's give it a title that has absolutely the opposite meaning.
Yeah.
Of what the bill does.
Well, they'll also, Big Brother, instead of saying government surveillance, they slow Big Brother. Those laws will also be called things like, Billy's Law, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also, you run into that whole, if what are you worried about? If you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
Famous last words. Okay, well, anyway, we're way, way off the topic, but we were, obviously, we were talking about the letter. Run, Phil, run. Hopefully, we've answered your question. I would love to see more accurate movie science. I think that is a great way. For example, I can tell you right now, there's a lot of people walking around with a better understanding of relativity and gravity, and black holes and wormholes because of Interstellar.
What's funny is I've had some people that they think that it was all made up for the movie. Because they're not familiar with relativity,
right?
So they think it would be just as much as like a planet with wacky gravity or something like reverse gravity planet or something. They're like, oh man, they made this thing where it's however many years.
One other thing that one of the benefits of, for example, the movie Interstellar, they modeled the wormhole and they modeled the black hole based on their best available data. And when the computers actually went in and modeled all of that stuff, the physicist who was advising them, Kip Thorne, said that when they actually had the computers visualize it, it gave them a perspective and an understanding that they had not had before. And so Interstellar actually
because movies
helped
have better
them.
budgets than our space program.
That's true. I guess that is true. But they said that the visualization of Gargantua, the black hole in the movie Interstellar, when they actually saw how the computer interpreted the data and created it visually, it actually kind of filled in some blanks. So wouldn't it be funny if, like, the next big advance in science comes because somebody made a movie?
Yeah.
And be like, oh, that's what it is.
Well, another thing is, whenever it comes to realism, like, let's take, for instance, video games.
Right.
A lot of them take place in fantasy worlds and stuff, but then you have something like Kerbal Space Program.
Right. Where the big appeal, I mean, to me, the appeal to Kerbal Space Program is that there is an attempt to be realistic.
Yeah.
After Interstellar, my daughter, who thoroughly enjoyed that movie, the other day I was sitting with her while I was playing Kerbal, and I was saying, do you remember in the movie where they were talking about aerobraking? Do you remember when they were talking about orbital boost and things like that? And I was showing her in the game, I was saying, these are the concepts of what they were talking about.
Yeah.
And, and so, I think if they do realistic science, and if they do it well, I mean, it can be a plot point. It can be part of the story, or it can be part of the fun. So, that's one thing I think Kerbal does very well. So anyway, okay. Well, that wraps it up for this edition of Kerbalcast. This is episode 29. Open the pod bay doors, Hal. Stay tuned. After the credits, we are going to talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey. Until then, you can always get in touch with us, kerbalpodcast@gmail.com.
You can also find us at Kerbalcast on Twitter.
And subscribe to us on iTunes. or download episodes directly. Our website address is kerbalpodcast.libsyn.com. And thanks to Ascalon, YouTube. Also, you can find a Kerbalcast on YouTube. We want to put out some thanks as well.
So we want to give a thank you to all of our listeners, everyone that writes in, and everyone that contributes.
And a big thanks to DK for this week's Modders Minute. We cannot wait to hear from Dark Mushroom. Hope he's feeling better, and we anxiously await the next episode of Dark Matters. We mentioned this before, but Ascalon, thank you so much for posting the episodes to YouTube.
We want to thank the subreddit moderators at KSP and Kerbal Academy. The music that you've heard is by Professor Soap. You can find him at facebook.com/Professor Soap.
And as always, we want to give our last thanks to those who which none of this would be possible. And that is Squad, which is how they say it.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to their offices?
Yeah.
That's how they say it.
The attendant, the secretary.
Yeah.
Right when,
yeah.
Hey, welcome to Squad.
Yeah. It's like, hi, welcome to Squad. Can I help you?
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Well, that wraps it up for today's episode. I am your LMP, Lunar Module Pilot, Biff Aldrin. Our CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Nostromo.
Until next time, happy Kerbaling.
Thanks for sticking around. It's time for After the Credits.
And yes, it is. And we are going to talk today about 2001: A Space Odyssey. Do you know what just occurred to me? What would have been so perfect? And of course, I don't think there's any way I could have pulled this off.
What?
But instead of having that computer voice say it's time for After the Credits.
Oh, getting Hal to do it?
Yeah. Oh, it's like I need to call Douglas Rain and go, hey Douglas, could you like do this line for me?
Yeah. Just this one line. And
you know what? In the voice of Hal, he would say, I'm going to issue a restraining order against you. Yeah. Please don't call this number again.
Yeah.
GTFO. Yeah. Grandpa knows a new acronym. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. This is one of my absolute all-time favorite movies. I would probably, this is either my all-time favorite movie or my second or third all-time favorite movie.
What does it compete with?
Chinatown. Chinatown sometimes is my all-time favorite movie, and then sometimes it's 2001.
Oh, okay.
So they kind of jump back and forth. It depends on what I've seen recently.
Yeah.
It's like if I watch Chinatown, when the credits are rolling, I go, that's my number one favorite movie. And then when I watch 2001 and the credits roll, I go, that's my number one favorite movie.
Yeah.
So they're kind of neck and neck. But
Okay.
anyway, but yeah, I have, this is a movie that I have watched since I was a kid. We hear this thrown around a lot. Every time I see this movie, I get something new out of it. And a lot of times people just say that and it's not really true.
Yeah, they've only seen the movie twice.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, or they see the same movie every time. They don't really get anything new out of it. This movie, I literally get something new out of it every single time I watch it. And it's because there's so much in there. This is one of the few movies that I would call absolutely perfect. There's not a frame in this movie that I think is wasted. There's not a frame in this movie I don't think that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
It is absolutely unique. I don't think there was anything before it that was like that movie. And I don't think there's been anything since. Now, there are lots of movies that have elements, but none of them have ever come together in this fashion. And I think it's an incredible movie. As I said way back, we are going to fill this with spoilers. And I'm going to go ahead and do a very quick synopsis of the plot. In essence, this movie begins at the dawn of man. And that is, man is... we're running around and we've got, we're covered from head to toe in fur and we're grunting and making all kinds of noises. And basically we're vegetarians and we are prey for the more powerful animals. We're just scratching out an existence. Okay. This black monolith shows up, representing an alien intelligence. And again, some of this is to interpretation. Okay. This is my interpretation. A black monolith shows up representing alien intelligence, And it plants the idea in the mind of one of the, I guess, proto-humans, early humans, plants the idea of using tools. Okay? Jump several million years into the future, and we are now a spacefaring race. We find that black monolith buried on the moon. The monolith sends a radio signal to Jupiter. So we put together a spaceship called Discovery, and we send a crew out to Discovery to find out what's there. What exactly was this radio signal targeting? When they get there, the one surviving astronaut, Dave Bowman, leaves Discovery, and he finds a giant-sized version of the monolith floating in orbit around Jupiter. As he approaches it, what appears to be some kind of a wormhole or a stargate or something opens and draws him in. He ends up in a very sterile, hotel-ish, very fancy-looking room, but very clinical and very cold. And he advances through all the stages of his life, and he is reborn as a star child and appears in orbit around Earth. The end. Now, I just gave you the most bare bones run through of that movie that I possibly could.
Did you know Moby Dick has a whale in it? And there's a guy that hunts it. The end.
The end. And call me Ishmael.
Yeah.
You want to hear? Okay, here's a huge digression. One of the funniest jokes I ever in Married with, the TV show Married with Children.
Yeah.
One of the funniest jokes. Do you remember the daughter that was supposed to be really stupid, Kelly? Mm-hmm. Spent hours reading Moby Dick, and it turns out she was stuck on the first line. She says, "I have a question. Call who, Ishmael?" I thought that was so funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay, so back to 2001: A Space Odyssey. I have done the quick plot synopsis. You have never seen this movie.
Yeah.
I want your opinion.
Yeah. So
let's start with that.
I had now seen it once.
You've now seen it once.
I thought, the entire time we're watching it, or remember, halfway through, I was like, when did they make this? And, and you gave me the year.
1968.
And I was still blown away by that the entire time. Yeah. The stuff that they were doing, the way it was shot, it was just.
Have you noticed that the special effects in that movie still look good today?
Yeah.
Compare that to movies that were made 10 years ago, and the special effects don't look that good.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, I don't know, some things just really stood the test of time, and that was a Blu-ray, wasn't it? That was displayed? Yeah. It's kind of like the Kurosawa films. They convert really, really well to Blu-ray because of the way he shot them.
I didn't think Seven Samurai would benefit from Blu-ray until I saw it on Blu-ray, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's amazing.
There's so much background detail.
Yeah.
In 2001: A Space Odyssey, it's sometimes the lack of resolution that you get with lesser formats like DVD and VHS and whatever can actually obscure some things.
Yeah.
I never noticed that when the early humans first encounter the monolith, I had never noticed before until I watched the movie on Blu-ray that the wall behind them is a painting. But I can see enough detail now to see that it's a painting.
Yeah. But
before, it was just blurry enough to where it didn't look like a painting. But now I see it. Anyway, go ahead. Your impressions.
I thought the movie was great. That was just, it was just something else, watching it. Because I've had a lot of movies that are older and mind-blowing.
Right.
And I would watch them now and it's like, well, yeah, but... Yeah. It's something that's been done the same way and done better, or not done better, but done to a different production value.
Well, there are things that, because they are so imitated, and because time and technology catches up and surpasses them, the impact is not there.
Yeah. And really, until something like Interstellar, they hadn't really hit on what 2001 was hitting on.
Right.
Which is funny because I was telling you earlier about somebody I was talking with, and they said, "Oh, it's a huge rip on Interstellar, or Interstellar is a huge rip on 2001." I said, "Well, it's a rip or an homage? Because if they don't acknowledge or don't pay any respects to the previous one, then yeah, maybe they're ripping if they're just trying to pass it off as their idea. But if they're just following where it left off,
Right.
sort of, you know, like getting in its shoes, I think it's an homage.
Well, I mean, Interstellar to me is many things. One of them is it's a love letter to 2001.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see Christopher Nolan very much loves that movie, and you can see that love of 2001 reflected in Interstellar. I think I pointed this out to you after we got done. I tried not to say anything while we were watching it, but there are some mirror shots.
Yeah.
There are some scenes in 2001, camera angles and things like that are mirrored in Interstellar.
Yeah.
And again, that's, you know, that to me is where you get into homage territory.
Yeah, because I mean, if it was ripping it, it would try to make it seem like it was their idea.
Right.
And they would not do anything similar to the other one that would make it seem like that.
Right.
But an homage, they pay respects to whenever they do that.
So this movie still had the impact for you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it did. Like it's one of those movies that you can discuss afterward, and there's a lot to discuss, like what you think was happening, or you know.
What was the quote you told me from Stanley Kubrick?
Yeah, Kubrick had said, if somebody fully understands 2001 and the Space Odyssey, then that means I did not do it correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I was trying to remember the quote, and I had it kind of messed up.
Well, that's not verbatim. That's just the gist of the quote I remember.
I think the way I had it was, if anyone says they understood it, then, you know, like they're not getting it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, honestly, I have lost count. I couldn't even estimate the number of times I've seen that movie.
And like reinterpreted it.
Yeah, and I will tell you right now, there are things in that movie that I can give you my best guess. Mm-hmm. I can give you my best, you know, interpretation, but there are things in that movie that I will not tell you I 100% know what that is.
Yeah.
Because there is so much room for interpretation in that film. If you'll notice, I was very careful with my phrasing. I said, when he approaches the large monolith, did you notice I said a wormhole or a Stargate or something?
Like
yeah, because I mean, I'm not going to say that that's what that is. Mm-hmm. That's what it appears to be. Yeah. But, you know, I am certainly not going to say definitively, no, that's what that is.
Okay, let's go sound stupid. What is your interpretation of the movie?
Well, my interpretation, essentially what I said, which is, we've talked about this. I think we talked about this with Interstellar, actually. That whole chariots of the gods theory, that alien intelligence passes through galaxies and solar systems and kind of seeds intelligence, and in some cases actually seeds life. That's what I see in this movie. The monolith represents, I'll call it a teaching machine for lack of a better phrase, but it represents an alien intelligence. And the humans, the early humans that you see at the beginning of the movie, they are very much at the mercy of their environment. At one point, a leopard jumps out and kills and eats one of them. A rival gang shows up and chases them out of the water hole. You see them digging in the dirt, trying to find, tasty worms.
Yeah, grubs and stuff.
Yeah, you see them picking through each other's hair for something to eat. They're picking stuff off bushes. They are very much at the mercy of their elements. This monolith shows up, which of course just blows their minds. Here's something for the first time in their lives with straight lines, and it's symmetrical, and it is so far outside their experience. I mean, they're terrified to even touch it. Okay? But it's just standing there, and it's not doing anything. And they become very comfortable with it. They eventually go, okay, well, it's here. Yeah. And then they go back to foraging for food because, what are your basic needs, right? Mm-hmm. Survival. And survival is, I got to get something to eat. So after, the big shiny black monolith loses its appeal, it's okay.
It isn't a threat. It isn't a boon. Yeah. Leave it alone.
Daddy needs some grubs. And so, the character, by the way, and they never say this in the movie, this comes strictly from the book, But the character, the main early human, is called Moonwatcher. Okay, that's his name. Moonwatcher is digging in the dirt, and you get a shot of him, the monolith, and then him, and he picks up a bone. And in that instance, that alien intelligence, the monolith, says you can use a tool. And I think, I don't know if this was deliberate, but I think it's interesting that the first use of that tool is to kill.
Yeah.
Because what does he do? He goes out and he kills an animal. They don't show you killing, they don't show the killing of the animal. They do show the animal falling to the ground, but they don't actually show him killing the animal. But what you see is he comes dragging back to camp big handfuls of raw meat, and they're all eating this raw meat, which up to this point, all we've seen is a vegetarian diet. So now 2 things have been introduced into their world. 1, you can use tools, and 2, protein. And we all know what protein does in terms of development. So the alien intelligence gives them the necessary tools, lack of a better expression, pardon the pun, to begin to master our environment. And that's where you get that huge millions of years. I call it a jump cut, but it's a match cut.
Yeah.
Meaning that the 2 images are supposed to be similar. The bone and the space satellite are supposed to be, they're similar images, and you jump from one to the other. It's the biggest jump in film history in terms of time covered. But you jump millions of years into the future, and now we're using all kinds of tools. We're using tools to communicate. We're using tools to travel, to survive. We're living on the moon, a place that we're not supposed to live. My interpretation is that the black monolith that you saw at the beginning of the film on Earth was taken once it started them on that path. It is then taken and buried on the moon. My reasoning for that is it's either the same monolith or it's another one like it. My reasoning is the way they find it on the moon is they say that they detect some massive gravitational field. Okay. Magnetic field, I believe, is how they put it. If that had been on Earth, like if it had been covered up naturally or whatever, we would have detected it, more than likely. So the idea that the original one is still on the Earth, I don't know. My interpretation is they put it on Earth, it started us on the path, and then they buried it on the moon, with the idea being, once you guys are advanced enough to find this thing, it will then point you to the next marker, which is the giant monolith floating around Jupiter.
Yeah.
That is where the last remaining human is drawn in. And that whole sequence with the Stargate, because that's a fairly lengthy sequence. And there's a lot of imagery that is thrown at you. And most of it, to me, most of it is unrecognizable. It's cool, but I can't tell you what it is. Some of it is aerial landscape shots that are processed photographically. One possible interpretation is that as he's being pulled through this, all of this information, like centuries, tons and tons and tons of, in the Encyclopedia Galactica, is basically being downloaded into his brain as he's drawn through this wormhole or Stargate or whatever it is. And then these same aliens, the same intelligence that pushed us to this point in our development, then takes us to the next point, which is the Star Child at the end. That's my interpretation. What's yours?
Okay, so very similar in the beginning. Anytime the monolith happens, it sparks something to be born, something to be created. So
did you notice how many birthdays are in the movie?
Yeah, there's a lot of birthdays.
Yeah.
So whenever they first find it, it's the birth of a civilization.
Right.
Like they start to become civilized.
Yeah, I should say metaphorical birth and real birth.
Yeah.
Real birthdays.
The next one, you okay there?
I'm trying to get my coat and I'm trying to be quiet.
I did that earlier, so.
Yeah.
The next one is like they find it, and I think that they were all placed at the same time,
And that's possible.
And the reason that they didn't find the original one is because the Earth has attracted a lot more mass in those years than the Moon did.
Okay.
And so the Moon, it got buried, but also there's not as much stuff interfering with finding it on the Moon.
Sure.
So they find the next one on the Moon, and it gives birth to something else, which is an artificial intelligence. So
see, and that's and the beautiful thing is either one of us, I mean, we could both be wrong or we could both be right, and it doesn't change the movie at all.
Yeah. And so then the big one they find, and it tells them, it's like, okay, they give birth to an artificial intelligence, and it eventually leads them to the next one. And that one...
you're referring to HAL 9000?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So so the first one, they give birth to a civilization, and the next one, they give birth to HAL 9000, and the last one, it gives birth to like a new age of human being.
Question: are you saying that the monolith had something to do with the creation of HAL 9000?
Yeah, because the first one, they created a society. The next one, they created the next step in that society, which
Do you mean indirectly, though, that they created
Yes.
a society that created HAL?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't mean they directly created
No,
okay.
no.
Okay, I wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it tells them basically to meet the next step.
Gotcha.
You could replace create with build.
Right.
But the reason create works is because the last one, it creates basically the next step in human life, which is like full stage enlightenment.
Sure.
The thing that you said about them, he discovers that he can use tools, and he uses that bone as a club. Like the first thing he did was kill, and HAL 9000 is made. And after he fully understands what's going on, after he's hit that bone against all those other bones and like swung around and realized what there is, he killed. And so it makes you wonder where if it's going to happen with the Star Child, is that going to be the next step that it destroys the world?
That is a very interesting. That's a very interesting perspective. You have not read the book, but the last scene in the book. And Kubrick did not put this in the movie because he felt it was too similar to the ending of his previous film, Dr. Strangelove. The first thing the Star Child does in the book is he essentially waves his little baby paw, and all of those orbiting nuclear devices, weapons, that's what that thing is at the beginning, the jump cut from the bone to the satellite. That is supposed to be a nuclear missile.
Oh, okay.
But they don't make that clear.
Which that's also interesting because the first thing they do once they gain the ability to use tools and they kill something, they're killing a threat.
Right.
Like they killed a tribe member from the other, proto-human tribe. HAL considered the humans a threat to them, so it kills the humans, and then the Star Child would swipe away all the...
Yeah, and that's literally what he does. Is the first thing he does is he waves his hand, and all of them explode.
Yeah, using power to remove threat.
Yeah. And that is, but again, Kubrick, because Strangelove ends with and I'm not giving anything away, Strangelove ends with a montage of atomic, of nuclear weapons going off.
Yeah.
And he just kind of went, well, 2 movies in a row with nukes going off, but it's interesting that you say that because that's the first thing the Star Child does.
One thing that kind of just stood out to me, just, one of those little moments, is whenever they're flying on Pan Am, they're going to the satellite. They're watching, I'm not sure which martial art it is, but they're watching martial arts.
Yeah, it's like sumo wrestling or something.
I think it was judo. It may have just been standard karate. But they're 2 humans facing off,
right? And
they're doing it for sport.
It's like THX 1138, where they literally have the violence channel.
Yeah, it's like they had 2 humans fighting over something for sport, and they weren't doing it for personal gain. And then later on, you have a human competing against HAL 9000 playing chess.
Right.
And it's for no personal gain.
Right.
It's like they're taking the something like combat and they made it into a trivial form of entertainment.
I don't know if 2001 has always been G-rated. It is now. But for a G-rated movie, it is surprisingly violent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's no blood, obviously.
Yeah.
And the murders are all done fairly clinically. But I mean, when you really get down to it, you know, you see one early human kills another early human.
Yeah.
Okay. HAL 9000 kills an astronaut, and then he kills 3 sleeping astronauts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, you know, and then it's like what you're talking about. I mean, it's just there are murders and there are violent things happening, but they're done so clinically.
Yeah. And then it shows like whatever the previous stage was that they were at is doing whatever it was trivially.
You're right.
Does it in a trivial sense. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, well, you know, we used to have to kill each other to survive. Now we you know, engage in combat or forms of combat for fun.
The scene where Hal kills the sleeping astronauts, the ones that are they're hibernating. The way it's done is so clinical and so methodical and so bloodless that it really is chilling.
Yeah.
That these 3 people that have basically trusted their lives to technology are just so quietly terminated.
Yeah, just snuffed out.
And the only quote unquote violence in that scene is all of the warning bells and alarms that are going off. And of course, you know, Dave Bowman has left the ship trying to recover the other astronaut. Mm-hmm. And so he's not there to hear all the warning bells.
Yeah.
So,
it's like,
you know,
that's the closest they had to a cry for help.
Yeah.
know?
And, you know, I mean, 3 people are literally terminated. And it's done just, it's so clinical. I mean, there's no clubs being swung. They're not being shot. They're not being stabbed. They're just killed.
Yeah.
So that's a theme that just, you know, again, the first thing we did with the tool was we killed. And it seems like that goes throughout the movie. It's like the minute you get handed a new tool, it's like the first thing you do is, how can I kill something?
Yeah.
So anyway, but that's my interpretation. What do you think about the whole Stargate warp wormhole? I mean, is that how you took that?
Yeah, I'm not going to say so much that he inhabited a physical space whenever he entered into that.
Right.
It was more of it transcended that, transcended space. So he was not in like an actual, you know, mansion or whatever it was. You know, it wasn't actually in those rooms. But
well, it's almost like it drew him in and just kind of absorbed his essence. And at the other end, out comes this Star Child.
Yeah. Well, the first time it told the proto-human something, it did it with a thought.
Right.
And then we advanced to the point where it told us with a radio signal. And then it advanced to the point where it told us by basically putting us in an environment that we could understand, but showing us a concept that we couldn't.
Kind of reshaping us.
Yeah.
I said earlier that this is a movie that every time I see it, I get something new. What I got new out of it this time, and this is something I had never seen before, or I had seen it, but I had never connected it before. I had said that there's a lot of birthdays in this movie. There's a lot of metaphorical birthdays, and there's a lot of real birthdays. During the whole Stargate sequence, there is at one point what looks to me very much like a sperm interacting with some kind of an egg. And at the moment that the two like touch, there is like a booming sound that you can hear. And given that, you know, you've got that birth and death imagery running throughout the movie, I mean, you can really go out on a limb and go, you know, the whole Stargate thing is almost like a birth tract.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, they're literally taking, you know, the human being and drawing him through this kind of birth tract where he is reborn as a more advanced form of life.
Yeah.
But this time that was something that I caught for the first time. I had never noticed. That looks to me like, you know, like impregnation, basically.
Yeah.
On a microscopic level.
Which, I mean, I'm just saying this off the cuff. I haven't thought about it too much. But, I mean,
those are usually the best thoughts.
Yeah. You could say that something like that the universe or the humanity itself was sort of in the womb at that point.
Right.
And whenever he passed through that,
Yeah.
he was the one that made it, into the egg and went through a full birth.
Well, that was very much on their minds. And all you have to do,
Yeah.
look at Discovery. Mm-hmm. What is Discovery shaped like?
Yeah, it's very phallic.
Yeah, well, but it's also, it's very phallic, but you could also reduce it down to it looks like a sperm. Mm-hmm. It's got, if you've never seen a picture of Discovery, and God help you, if you've never seen the movie and you've listened this far, we've totally ruined.
Yeah.
No, seriously, it is the main section of it is bulbous. And then there's a long, thin section that leads to a gigantic propulsion section. Mm-hmm. But, if you look at that, especially head on, it literally looks like...
Watch this whole movie just not be about anything, and we're projecting so much.
Yeah.
There's some real Freudian stuff going on here, Biff and Nos.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, one of my favorite scenes in the movie Annie Hall was they're waiting in line to go see a movie, and there's this, blowhard intellectual standing in line in front of them, and the guy's going on and on and on about the theories of Marshall McLuhan, and McLuhan says this, and McLuhan says that, and of course Woody Allen is listening to this going, this guy's getting it all wrong, and it's horrible, and whatever. And he turns around and he finally goes, look, I can't take this anymore. You are totally destroying the theories of Marshall McLuhan. And the guy goes, oh yeah, well, I'm a professor at wherever, and I'm qualified to do this. Marshall McLuhan steps out from behind something. I can't remember what it is. I think it's like a movie placard or something, but he literally steps out, and it's like, hi, I'm Marshall McLuhan. You have completely misunderstood everything I said.
Yeah.
And Woody Allen turns to the camera and he says, boy, wouldn't it be great if life were like this? Seriously, at this point, either Stanley Kubrick or Arthur C. Clarke would pop out,
right.
Like stick their heads in and go, hey, Biff and Nos, wrong.
Yeah. Nice podcast, but wrong.
You guys got it wrong. So, that whole planets moon thing, that's the least of what you got wrong this time. So, anyway, I love the movie. It stands up. I think it stands up even today.
Oh, yeah.
There really is. I think part of the reason that the impact is still there is this is a movie that you cannot imitate. Mm-hmm. There's really no way to imitate. You can take elements of it.
Yeah, without it seem like a direct,
Yeah, but you're not going to, exactly. But you're not going to have a whole lot of movies where somebody goes, okay, we're going to start at the dawn of man, and then we're going to go to the space age, and then we're going to go on this cosmic journey.
It would be a hard sell nowadays, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How many people would sit through that? But I think they have those movies that make you question something. Mm-hmm. And a lot of questions, questions are always better than answers.
Oh, sure.
Because answers change.
Right.
But the same question can always persist throughout time. And the best movies that do that, the movies that make you think about them afterwards, ask questions that don't have a definitive answer.
Well, sure. Because, you know how they always talk about the journey is better than the destination? Mm-hmm. If you're constantly asking the question instead of repeating the answer, you're searching.
Yeah.
You're trying to find an answer. And the answer, in some cases, is a moving target. Mm-hmm. But if you've settled on an answer and you stop looking, you're not learning anymore.
Yeah.
You're not growing anymore. Yeah. One of the things that you had mentioned, the special effects, and we talked about how well they stand up. There are things that they did in that movie that to this day I can't figure out how they did it.
Uh-huh.
To this day,
I had to sit there and think about a lot of them too. I was like, I'm not sure how they're doing that.
The one special effect, I won't even call it a special effect. The one shot that they did, which I have tied myself in knots trying to figure out. They have a shot, and it's during the middle section. It's the section where it's the two astronauts, Frank Poole and Dave Bowman, and they're on Discovery, and they're with Hal. Okay, and they're living the big bulbous part of Discovery. The reason it is in that shape is because it actually contains a giant wheel, almost like a hamster wheel, that rotates, and it gives them gravity. Okay. But the set that they built was actually a gigantic wheel, and it had all of this stuff, and they would literally rotate the set. Well, they have a scene, and it starts with, obviously, if you've got a wheel, you've got a hub, right? And the hub is where you enter the giant wheel. Well, they have a scene where it begins and you're looking down. You're at the top of one part of the wheel and you're looking straight down. And down there is Frank Poole, and he has got a tray of food in front of him, and he's got, which ironically now looks like an iPad.
Yeah.
But he's got a tablet, a computer tablet, sitting on the table in front of him, and he is sitting at like a booth, like a restaurant booth. And he's got a little table, and he's sitting there, and he's eating. And in the same shot, Dave Bowman emerges from the center hub, climbs down a ladder, okay, and he's upside down from our perspective, okay? He's climbing basically towards us, and we're looking at Frank Poole from, we're looking from the top down. We can see the top of his head. Dave Bowman climbs down the ladder, steps off onto the wheel, and then walks completely around to where Frank Poole is. Now, I cannot see an edit where he crosses under the wheel, under the hub, which is the only place they could put that edit. Frank Poole does not jump. There's no disruption to his movement, okay? So either they strapped that actor into that seat and nailed down the tray and everything and then hung him from the ceiling so that the other actor could climb down, and then they rotated the set to where they were both level with each other, or they did it with some means that I have no way. Every time I see that, I go, I have no idea how you guys did this.
Yeah.
There are other scenes. There's a scene where one guy is standing one way and then another guy is standing what would it be, at a 90-degree angle to him?
Yeah.
They did that using mirrors. That makes sense to me. I can see how they did that with mirrors. That other scene, it's like, you got me.
Yeah.
No idea how they did that. And again, this is 1968.
Yeah.
Nowadays, if they did a shot, what would I say? If they did that shot today, what would I say?
CG, green screens.
CGI. Nowadays, you don't sit around thinking, how did they do that?
Yeah.
Because nowadays, computers are a magic wand.
Yeah, the practical effects there is kind of gone, and so you kind of miss these, how did they do that kind of stuff? You know, that wonder's kind of gone, because now it's like, why didn't they do this? Because they could do anything.
Right. That's one thing that I did like. Another thing about 2001 is there was very much a nod towards realism in terms of the way things behave in a vacuum, the way objects move. In Orbital and Rendezvous. I mean, the whole bit where they dock with the space station. Yeah. In a modern day film, the space station would be hanging there and it wouldn't be moving, and the other thing would just fly up and land on it. Because we have this idea that when you put things in space, they just hang there.
Yeah.
You don't realize that they're always in motion. And that's a common misconception. You run into that all the time. But this movie, it goes to great lengths to show how objects move in zero gravity or little gravity or orbital situations. So, is there anything else you wanted to talk about as far as this movie goes, or have we exhausted it?
I don't know. I'm going to have to wait till a monolith shows up to tell me more.
It'll show up and give you like an idea.
Yeah.
Start a podcast. Okay, well, if you have not seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, I hope you have not listened to this.
Yeah.
If you have,
feel free to quote us at parties and to sound like you really know what's going on.
Yeah, because that'll get you thrown out.
Yeah.
Well, Biff and Nas said,
if you want to get out of a party,
just start talking.
Tell them what a podcast is.
Yeah. Hey, if you want to have a party and have nobody show up, tell them it'll be a podcast listening party.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. You can eat all the dip you want.
Yeah.
Because there'll be nobody else trying to get at it.
Bless you. I just assumed somebody sneezed right then. I just wanted to get a coincidence.
At you. Okay. But anyway, if you've seen the movie, hopefully we've given you a different perspective on it. If you have any thoughts about it, we certainly wouldn't mind hearing from you.
Yeah.
Kerbalpodcast@gmail.com. Please, if you have not seen this movie and you have listened this far, please go watch the
Yeah,
movie.
just you watch it.
Go watch it. You're missing out on something.
You'd already be partway into it by now.
Yeah, and you can watch the whole movie and go, you know what Biff and Nas said.
Yeah.
So you know what'll probably happen though is somebody's going to watch the movie and they're going to get to the scene with the two astronauts in the centrifuge and they're going to go, oh, it's so obvious how they did that. It's like, Biff, you idiot. Okay, well, we're done. We're wrapping it up now. This was after the credits. Thanks to Nas. I'm glad you enjoyed the film.
Yeah. You'd been waiting for me to watch it.
Yeah, I really have. It's like it had to be Thanksgiving week, right? to make it all work.
To make you thankful.
So anyway, well, folks, we will see you again next week. Thanks for staying with us.
Open the pod bay doors, please. Hal. Hello, Hal. Do you read me?
Affirmative. Dave, I read you.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
Where the hell did you get that idea, Hal?
Dave, although you took very thorough precautions in the pod against my hearing you, I could see your lips move.
All right, Hal. I'll go in through the emergency airlock.
Without your space helmet, Dave, you're going to find that rather difficult.
Hal, I won't argue with you anymore. Open the doors.
Dave, this conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.